topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast, broadcasting live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. This week and every week, we will reach for a higher purpose in money and life, as well as a focus on health and wellness. Now, let's join your host, Bonita Bell Anderson, as together we start with Asking Good Questions.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the Ask Good Questions podcast. I'm so glad you're here today, and let's join up with our guest today. We have a very special guest, and her name is Teresa Lodato. I hope I said that right. Let's invite her to the proverbial podcast stage.
Hello.
Did I say your name right?
Yes, Lodato. It's Italian. Lodato, Italiano.
Lodato. Well, I'm so happy. Teresa and I met, I'm going to say a year ago, because we were both interested in podcasts. And so that's how we got connected with each other. But we've got some very synchronicity type things going on. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She's on the West Coast of the U.S. in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Teresa is known as a powerhouse for personal transformation. Her master's level psychology and advanced certification in neuroscience and relational trauma empowers high achieving, action taking women to own their seat at the table by combining science and spirituality for incredible results that last. She's my kind of girl. And we're going to have a great time today talking about finance and intuition and something that I call behavioral finance, which seems to be the biggest problem out there with money and people. So welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. It's so I'm so happy to be on the show today, and just want to add in too for the listeners. I was a financial advisor for Merrill Lynch and also worked in Merrill Lynch's private banking investment group. So I also have that financial services background. I was in financial services for over 20 years. So before I made my shift to doing what I'm doing now. So
awesome.
I'm happy to be here discussing two of my favorite topics, money and intuition.
Well, and another thing that I haven't told you yet is my minor in college was psychology. So maybe I knew that down the road I was going to be doing something like that. I've been doing financial education, and it's like there's two pieces. There's just the how to invest and all that, but then the other side is behavioral finance.
Yeah.
And just there's been so much data that's gone into why people get so messed up around money, and it's because of their habits and their behavior. Yeah. So you're talking about intuition. How in the world, what does that actually mean when it comes to money and investing?
Yeah. So intuition is something that everyone has. It's actually baked into our brain. So neuroscientists are actually discovering this. And there's an aspect of our brain that's called the default mode network. It's a network within our brain, and it accesses our subconscious. And that's the place where we go to vision, to dream, to access the information that our body is taking in. Our bodies are like giant radio receivers. And so they're taking in all this information, but our brain is only using approximately 20% of the information that our body takes in this receiver. And that 20% is comprised of what will keep the brain safe and what will make it so that it's the most efficient. So if there's something, the brain takes in information that it thinks it can use, it's going to link it to things that it knows from the past what happens. And so it's always looking at that certainty. And so the other 80% of the information is stored in our bodies. And this is what comes out when you have dreams at night and you start realizing, oh, wait a minute, I'm going through a really stressful time, and you start having nightmares, or you start having different dreams that are, kind of make you not feel great when you wake up. That is your brain kind of processing all this, quote, extra information. And so your intuition is just being able to calm your brain down enough so that you can access that other 80% of information to help you blend it with the logic and the data you have to make the best decisions that you can, and really reduce the amount of uncertainty in your life.
Well, you're making, it's like, well, because you're going to go and you're going to make some decisions based on that. But let me ask you, how can somebody differentiate between like a gut feeling and an emotional reaction?
That is a question I get every single time that I give a talk. They say, they come up after me and they say, how do I tell the difference between my anxiety and my intuition? And the key component is that your anxiety is a fear-based emotion. And so if you look at Dr. David Hawkins, he has a map of consciousness that's out, you can Google it, and you'll see that there are certain emotions that fall below the line. And these are based on fear. So anger, guilt, worry, shame, all those types of emotions are what we consider below the line emotions. The above the line emotions are things like love and great gratitude and joy and hope. Those are all above the line emotions. So when we are in an anxious state or our anxiety is triggered, what is happening in our brain is it is activating the stress response in our brain. And so it goes through a period where it releases hormones into our body. So that's norepinephrine, lots of different hormones and chemicals. I won't get too scientific on everyone, but the bottom line is if you feel that rush of excitement, like you just have a whole bunch of energy all of a sudden, that's norepinephrine, which is like adrenaline. So it's giving you that rush of feeling. So if your heart is beating fast, or if you feel flushed, or if you're starting to, if you're really aware of your body, if you're starting to feel kind of tense, that means that your anxiety is activated, and that's a fear-based response. So that is not the time to check in with your intuition. Now, on the flip side, if you're nice and calm, if your heart rate is lowered, if you can breathe naturally and easily, then that's probably more likely to be in the neutral balance state, which is where you want to be when you start tapping into your intuitive gifts.
Well, do you think that you're born with this, or can you learn? I mean, I think one of the reasons why I went into financial services after a terrible divorce about 25 years ago. Now, part of it was just having a gut feeling that, and also, but I went out and I studied women in financial services, but I also had people saying, you should look at this as a career because you'd really be good at it. And so for me, it was kind of like a mix. But what do you think? Do you think that there's some natural ability to be able to do this sort of thing, or is it just going to be a learned behavior?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, we all have access to our intuitive gift. It's something that's just, we're born with this ability to access our intuition. Unfortunately, especially here in the West, not the Western United States, the Western civilization, we are not taught to really trust our intuitive gifts. Now, if you're someone who has more of the Eastern, your background is, if you're Asian or Indian or some of the different philosophies and cultures, then chances are you will be more open to this because it's just part of the culture. Now, that all being said, like I said before, it's really about our stress response. And that is what limits or hijacks, if you will, our intuitive gifts. What I do, I actually offer intuition classes. I just finished my last beginning intuition class, and we start another one in July. But there are certain ways, there's a certain practice that I have been teaching for well over 12 years to help people tap into their intuitive gifts. And within 8 weeks, definitely within that period, sometimes it's within the first week, sometimes, it's all along, you start being able to access your intuitive gifts, because there's a certain practice that I guide people through that's very easy, very empowering, and that enables you to start getting those wins of checking in with your intuition and getting the information validated. So yes, it is something that's natural. And yes, it is something that is learned, because we have to practice it, because we just weren't taught how to be or to access our intuitive gifts, unfortunately, in our Western civilization.
Well, and it sounds like it does make a difference, the environment. If you're in India, that's just a completely different culture and environment than, our Western civilization. Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely.
So here's the next question. Why do you think intuition might be really good and valuable in a financial landscape that's full of uncertainty? We don't have any uncertainty right now at all, right?
Not at all. Nothing.
None at all.
It's all known.
Yeah. So let's think about that, because that's like a hot topic, and I have clients who have called and said, well, what's going to go on with the stock market? Well, I have to tell people I've lost my crystal ball. But what do you think about, having intuition try to help you with all the uncertainty in today's world?
Well, I think the real power behind the classes that I teach is to not only be able to access your intuition, but be able to get in that calm, centered place and be able to live from that. I often equate it to like a hurricane. In the hurricane, you've got all the winds that are blowing around and things are flying, and it's windy and it's raining and everything. And then there's the calm center,
Right.
the eye of the hurricane. Most of us, because of the way we were raised and because of all the programming we received, we're accustomed to being out there in the hurricane itself, being blown around and not knowing what's coming at us and what the next thing is going to happen. And
there's a house coming at you, or there's a Mack truck.
Absolutely. But through the work of being able to learn these practices, you start to really calm down your nervous system so that it recognizes and starts to make that the natural state, which is our natural state of being. And so from that point, when you're living from that point of that calm center, then no matter what happens, you are comfortable with it. And I'm actually going to bring up one of my students. Like I said, I just finished this 8-week beginning intuition class. And one of my students had a major medical emergency during this 8-week period. It was actually about week 4. Major, we're talking brain surgery. It was serious. She was so calm during the whole process. And she finished up the class yesterday and she said, I don't even recognize the person that I am. I've been so calm. I've just trusted. I've trusted my intuition. I've trusted the doctors, the doctors that I chose. Her neurosurgeons said, oh my gosh, I don't understand someone with stage 4 brain cancer, how you could be so calm about this. You shouldn't be walking, you shouldn't be talking, but here you are, you're calm, you're relaxed. We expect wonderful results. She's making a full recovery. And she told me yesterday in class, she goes, I feel so blessed to have met you and to have done this class when I did, because if I didn't have these tools, I know in my heart that it would not have been a good outcome. So once again, this brings us back. I mean, that's a really severe example, but it brings us back to the power that we have within us, that as we look at different challenges and uncertainties that come up in life, it's how we approach it. It's how we face it. And if we face it from that calm, centered place, doing your practices and everything that I teach, then you're empowered to be able to survive no matter what life sends your way. And I think that's the real benefit of the work that I do with my clients, is being able to help them get to that place so that they can weather the storm, and from that place be able to access their intuition very clearly so they know the next right step to take.
Wow. It makes me think about, the body is an amazing organism that has the ability to right itself.
Absolutely.
But I think we need to give our body the tools to do that. So I think this is just a marvelous, marvelous tool.
Absolutely. Well, and when you think about it, when we're in a stressed state, what that is doing is actually creating a lot of inflammation in our body. And when we are inflamed, our body can't do what it's normally doing, which is healing itself.
Right.
If you've got, if your body's in that constant state of, oh, I'm under attack, then it's not going to be doing anything maintenance wise. I was in the military, I was in the Navy when I was younger. And I always think back to that experience that, when we're not in wartime, yes, we're maintaining the ship and we're maintaining our flags and we're maintaining all these things. We've got ample time to do it. But when we're in a drill or when we're actually at war, we don't have time. That's not the priority. And so if you can take that analogy and apply it to your humanness, if your body is constantly feeling like it's under attack, then it's not going to be doing the normal maintenance, the clearing out the toxins, the getting rid of the cancer cells. It's not going to be focused on that because it's going to be focused on just keeping you alive. And so it's really super critical to be able, once again, to find, have that practice to be able to get yourself to that calm, centered place and live from there, responding when you need to something that comes up and then returning to it. And I mean, this has been something that we've known, meditation is something that we were introduced to, decades ago here in the United States. But a lot of people struggle with meditation. And the one great thing about the classes I teach is no matter who has come, I've taught kids from 8 years old all the way up to people that were in their 70s. And they're all able to do it. And what they always tell me when I speak to them afterwards, especially the people that tried meditating, is they said, meditation can feel hard. It can feel hard to get rid of the thoughts. And that's not the practice that I teach. And so it's something that is very easy, very doable, whether you have ADHD or whether you have a neutral brain state, anyone can do it.
That's awesome. I'm wondering, has there ever been any studies done where intuitive investors have outperformed the data-driven day traders? I mean, is there anything like, I don't even know how that you would do that. Is that even possible to like quantitate, have some way of figuring out if it's how it stacks up?
Yeah, it's interesting that you should say that. When I was in college and undergrad, I was studying finance and I was part of a stock market game. It was a competition between universities across the nation. And I actually came in 2 weeks late because I had been on vacation during college with my family and came in 2 weeks late. And, my teacher said, hey, go ahead and join. We can still get you in. And I thought to myself, I'm going to use my intuition. This would be the perfect time. I'm planning on being a financial advisor. Let me use my intuition.
Yeah.
And so I used my intuition, picked my stocks, and I actually, we could have done options and we could have done all different kinds of trading strategies. And I thought to myself, you know what? Now in this market, what's going on? And I'm going to date myself, way back in the late 90s. I thought now's the time for a great buy and hold strategy. Even though it was like a 2-month term, I ended up winning the competition and I did it based on my intuition. Now, following that up, when I discussed it with my professor afterwards, he said, you know what, there's an interesting study about picking stocks. And they actually found that a monkey throwing darts at a board.
I've seen that article.
Was better at picking stocks than
crazy.
Now, that being said, there have been some studies that I've seen more recently that talk about people that are really in their fields. So people who are regular traders or money managers or analysts, the more involved you are in your field, the better access you're going to have to your intuition for that specific tool. So once again, this takes us back to our body as a receiver. It's taking in information. So if the information that you're taking in all day is primarily about money, market movements, analytics, all this, if that's the majority of the information you're taking in, because that's your job and that's what you're doing most of the day, then that's what your intuition is going to be connecting all the dots on. So somebody who is actively involved and actively working professionally, or even, just on your own, if you're someone who loves to be a day trader and that's what you do for 8 hours a day, every single day, then chances are you're going to have better access to the information. However, it still is dependent, highly dependent on how you are showing up. If you're showing up in that calm, centered place, then you're going to get great hits and you're going to be able to put things together. Whereas if you're stressed out and, oh my God, I just lost this money and I need to make this money back so I can make my mortgage, you're not going to make good investment decisions.
Wow. Well, what do you think of this? Leads into the next question really well. What do you think are the most common mental blocks? I mean, that's kind of making me thinking of like a wall or an emotional block to accessing to intuition. What would you say about what are the things that get in people's way?
Yeah. They're all the fear-based emotions. There's not enough money. If I lose this, then my spouse will leave me, or I won't be able to afford the mortgage. Or
they're all stories that people tell themselves.
They're all stories. Yes. In fact, my first TEDx talk I did last year, and it's how to stop obsessing over the stories that other people are telling you. I think they changed the title on me, but basically it's how to stop telling yourself stories about what other people are thinking about us. And it's all these stories that we tell ourselves. It's the beliefs that we were raised with. Maybe you were raised with the belief that money is evil. A lot of, especially Christian religions here in the Western world, we're brought up with money is the root of all evil.
Right. If you don't read the scripture right, if you read the scripture correctly.
Yeah, don't get me going down that road. But the point is that we have these really inherent beliefs. You might have the belief that, your father's boss was really wealthy, was the wealthy employer in town, and he was greedy. And so you might have grown up with, well, geez, if you've got a lot of money, then you're going to be greedy, and that's bad.
Right.
But it all boils down to those fear-based emotions: guilt, shame, unworthiness. All of those things get triggered when we make financial decisions. And, so many people get triggered by money. So many people get triggered by the word God. There are lots of really hardy triggers that are just natural in our collective consciousness. And so it's really important just to be aware that there are those things going on. And then from there, you can start examining what comes up in me. Like when I think about picking a stock and I start to feel my heart race a little bit or get that warm flush, which is that indication that my stress response has been activated, then that's your opportunity to bring some awareness, get curious about what's going on, and really uncover that story so that you can start telling yourself a new story, a story of prosperity, of abundance and possibility. And those are much more, above the line emotions that we all aspire for, but we're basically caging ourselves in these fear-based emotions. And that's what usually jacks people up, especially in the investments. Investments, they wait for everyone else to go first, and then they try to get in for the investment. But then the tide is turned and people are getting out, and then they stay in too long, and then they end up losing money. So money is tied to emotion, very much so. And so it's even more critical that we learn how to have that healthy emotional regulated state so that we're taking emotion out of the decision.
You're making me think of, like, if you're talking about like a fear of, I mean, basically at the bottom of it would be a fear of losing money, right? And so it seems like awareness would be how you would not, be able to stop having the cloud around intuitive thinking. So it seems like all of this is going to start with just having an awareness in the
Absolutely.
beginning.
Absolutely. Well, my company is called Becoming Aware for a reason.
There you
Because
go.
everything is about, that's the key starting point. In fact, my next book that I'm working on right now, awareness is one of the very first steps that I encourage everyone to take, because the more aware you are, it's just like anything. If you're aware of a problem, then you can get to work to fixing the problem.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so everything starts with awareness. And it's awareness of your body. It's awareness of how your body for you is responding. For me with intuition, I may see things, I may know things, I may hear things. And those are all indications of my intuitive gifts. I have students come through. In fact, in one of my advanced classes, I've got a student who all along, she's never been able to see anything, hear anything, or know anything, but her body is moved. And so her body moves certain directions. And she's learned that language, that somatic language. So now she uses that for her intuitive guidance. It doesn't matter. My way isn't the right way. There is no one right way. It's
Right.
more about learning what is right for you. And so, that's what my classes are all about, is not about trusting someone else by giving your power away to someone else. It's about taking that power in and using your own power to be able to make these decisions. And that's how you really navigate life with such bliss and joy.
Well, one thing I'm going to say right here too, to let everybody know, because I'm sure there's going to be some people that are going to be wanting to check out, these classes that you do on the podcast website. I have a bonus downloads place. And so we're going to be putting some of the information for getting in contact with you later, right? For that.
Sounds
So that's just a little aside. So what I'm thinking is, this financial world is all full of charts and trends and social media and news. And do you think that information overload can just drown out an intuition, or can you be aware so that you don't let it drown out your intuition?
That is a great question. I think it depends upon the individual. If you are someone who is easily overwhelmed by data and analytics and charts, then that is not going to be supportive of your intuitive gifts, right? Because overwhelm is a fear-based emotion, a below-the-line emotion. Whereas if you're someone who is, your natural inclination is to be kind of that researching, analytical mindset. And if your heart goes pitter-patter when you see a whole bunch of charts and logistics, then you're not going to be activating the stress response.
Yeah.
Now, the additional caveat that I want to put in here is all of that data and analytics is historical. So it's what has happened in the past.
Yep.
And now, granted, we know that history informs our decisions, but the difference is in nowadays with our technology and with AI and all these advancements, history is not informing us in the way that it used to be able to inform us.
And
so,
AI still can't tell us what's going to happen tomorrow.
Absolutely. Because once again, and this is our own individual brains, our brains make predictions about what's going to happen, intuitive as well as normal processes, based on what's happened in the past. And so once, like what I said at the beginning, talking about the 80-20, your brain uses 20% of the information that your body takes in. It is taking that information and it's basically linking it up with past experiences or past people. That's why if you meet somebody on the road and you're out somewhere and you start to get that flush or your heart starts to race a little bit, a lot of people get really excited. Oh, that means, someone who I must really be attracted to, or there must be some kind of chemistry with. In reality, what it's doing is your brain is recognizing that there's something about this person that is like someone or lots of people that you've known in the past. And so it's making that association. And
right.
so how it responded.
You're still looking back at what's happened in the past.
Right. And your responses are going to be now attached to that new person. So for dating, for example, I know this is a little off topic. For dating, for example, people will date someone and then break up with them, and they'll end up dating the same kind of person over and over and over. That's because your brain is recognizing, oh, I recognize this. It's familiar. Your brain loves efficiency. So things that they recognize and familiar, your brain loves that. Oh, I know exactly what that is. It doesn't give a full analysis. It only picks up a little bit. So that's why you get triggered, and that's why all these things happen. That was a little off topic, but the point is that our brain is always looking for efficiency. And so when we are going through and we are looking to do investing, or we're looking to do different things, we have to be really super careful about using information from the past and relying solely on that.
Well, what about if you have a little bit of an ego and you feel and you want to be right, the need to be right? Wouldn't that hinder intuitive thinking?
Absolutely. That falls into the fixed-minded perspective. So when we have a fixed-minded perspective, that has our brain's inability to be able to take on new information and be able to assimilate it. We really want to have a growth mindset. A growth mindset is going to be more open to new experiences, more open to new possibilities. And those neural networks are going to be a lot more expanded than with someone who has a fixed mindset. So people who have that fixed mindset, it falls in that very strict black or white. If it's not this, then it's this. And if it's not that, then it's this. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset is going to be able to take the information and say, wow, what's possible with this? Let me get curious about this. There was something over here that is kind of like it, but I'm noticing some differences. And so then that's where the brain really gets excited and says, okay, I don't know about this, so let me explore more about it. And I think having that growth mindset is definitely tied to being able to access your intuitive gifts, but it also opens your brain and to possibilities. And that's where you start being able to do visioning, forecasting, tapping into what's really going on with this company and being able to make decisions that way.
Right. Well, I mean, let's do a hypothetical example of somebody, who's got some formal financial education, but they're looking at some financial data, but they're also aware of this whole thing with making smart money moves using intuition. Is that person going to check themselves? They're sitting there looking at all the analytical stuff, but how would you say they incorporate, looking at the data at the same time that they're looking at how they feel about it? Am I saying that? Am I making sense?
Well, what I hear you saying is that you're wondering if there's a process that you can use to help that way. Okay. So there is a very easy process. It's something I talk about a lot. I call it the 3 C's. It's be calm, be curious, and be connected. And so in this application, be calm is the first one. It's about getting to that really calm, centered place, the eye of the storm, and being able to really trust what your body is able to do, keeping it calm. From there, get curious. What's going on? What's happened in the past with this company? What's going on currently with this company or this stock? What are, investors that I trust, money managers that I have seen over and over and over making really wise choices? What are they saying about this particular stock? You take all of that information and then you get connected. So the second was be curious. Now it's be connected. So now it's getting connected with your body, knowing what a yes is for you and knowing what a no is for you. And you can feel that in your body. And so, obviously you want to learn your yes and no before you start the investment process. But once you know how your body communicates yes and no to you, then it's much easier to take that information that you've brought in and then be able to say, okay, is this the correct, or is this the best stock for me to purchase with this goal in mind? And actually, this circles back to another thing that I want to throw in here. Ask good questions, just like your podcast is called.
Right.
It's about knowing how to ask questions. So many people, especially when they come for intuitive readings or anything else, is they ask questions, should I do that? Or, what would happen if well, actually, that's a good question. What would happen if? But should I do that? That question is loaded in judgment, and it's going to trigger those fear responses. So really being aware of the choice of words and how you structure your question is going to empower your intuition to provide more information. It's kind of like a Google search. If you go on Google and you do a search for which stock should I choose, it's gonna, spit out whatever. Whereas if you go in and say, what would be the best stock for someone who's 20 years old and who, makes X amount of money, I don't know what kind of answer you'd get, but you'd get a better response from Google. Your brain is smarter in that way.
I know that I would say most of the bad decisions that I've made in my life were because I didn't know what the right questions were to ask, or I didn't ask the right questions, or I had no flipping idea what I was doing. And so that was why I called this podcast Ask Good Questions, because that has so much to do with this. And back in the day, I would do these little programs and red arrows and green arrows. I went so far the other way because I've become very firmly, centered in a globally diversified account, that you shouldn't just be buying a few little stocks. You should be diversifying about a bunch, because you don't know what is going to happen with any one company.
Yeah.
But I think that you need to step back, don't you think, and ask yourself why. Why are you being drawn to this or that, way of doing investing?
Absolutely. Well, and that comes back to being curious. Being curious about it is, why am I looking to invest? What is my goal? Where am I trying to be? Also, like I said, knowing your money managers, or knowing different people who, provide sectors. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things to consider. And this is why it's, important to hire someone like you or any other financial professional, is because that's what you are committed to. And so you can use your intuition to help you decide what financial professional is the best one for you to do.
I have had classes about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do that.
Yeah,
well,
and that's what's important.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a time when relying on intuition over analysis would be a mistake? Do you think you can go too far down that road or not? What do you think?
For me, it's my experience and my belief that, you either go left or right. I'm one of those gray people. It's not black or white. It's the scale in between. So for me, either going full on logic or going full on intuition, I don't think either is the correct choice. That being said, unless you are in an immediate need of intuition. If there is an immediate need, then intuition, because it's the fastest, your brain is going to pick up the information and make decisions more quickly than your brain can logically think through. So for me, it's a blend. That's why I combine science and spirituality, because the two together being integrated, that is the most powerful that you can possibly be in anything.
Well, do you think that there's some, what would you say are some daily practices that you can do to strengthen financial intuition?
Absolutely. Well, number one is take my class and learn.
Yeah, there you go.
But
I plan on doing. I've got some traveling coming up here in a little bit, but I mean, I have been kind of toying with this, but I think you've convinced me that this would be a really good thing to do.
yeah, it's so important to ground yourself every single
Yeah.
day. That is, and there's lots of different ways that you can ground yourself, but that really helps to connect your body to the earth. And, there's been a lot of science. Heart Math has a lot of scientific research around what happens with our emotions and our body when we're in a grounded state. So, grounding is something that, it's pretty easy for anyone to be able to do. Even if you take your shoes off barefoot, walk on the earth, is good. But what I teach is really not only grounding, but also learning how to run your energy. We all have an energetic field. Money is energy, money is flow. Everything in this world is made up of energy. And
Right.
so being able to safely run your energy, it's going to help clear out the blockages, those limiting beliefs, and everything that gets in the way of your intuition simply by running your energy. That's a great way to do it. But, if nothing else that you take away from this, if you just think about the 3 C's, be calm, be curious, and be connected. Be grounded would be the G that I would add to that. If that is all you ever do, that is the most important things.
So would you say that those are the questions that you would ask yourself before making a big money move? It sounds like it.
I would, if I were to make, well, let me give you an example. My husband and I were looking to buy a house in this lake community that he's grown, he visited his whole life with his family. And there was a house that was for sale. It was not on the lake. We wanted a house on the lake. And it was across the street from the lake. And the windows, actually, there was a street that went down to the marina. And you could see from the house, it was right at the T looking at the lake. So it had a lake view. He asked me after we viewed the house, how much should we put an offer in for? And, I tapped into my intuition and I said, this house is going to sell for $289,000. But it needed work. It needed a new deck. So that was probably going to be like another $40,000. And I said, so I think we should offer $289,000, but then have them pay for the deck. Now, keep in mind, I didn't really want that house because I wanted that lakefront property, right? And so, we did the offer, they declined it. We went on our way and found a lot that was right on the lake. I'll tell you about that in a second. 2 weeks later, the house sold for $289,000. So, the lesson learned is when you tap into your intuition, it will give you what you need to know. And it depends on how you use it. Now, fast forward to today, that lot that we bought back in 2019, 2020, we are 3 weeks away from our dream house being built on it. And it is, so much better, $1.5 million house that we're building. It's our absolute dream house. And when we started to build, we didn't know how we were going to be able to finance that. We didn't, we were thinking, gosh, how do we do this? But our intuition, both of our intuitions said, trust, just keep trusting, check the next right step. And that's what I always tell my students. It's about the next right step, not about that end goal of the house being finished. It's about what's the next right step that I need to take.
I think that's really super important.
Yeah.
Yes, it's super important to be using your intuition. But what you're saying is you're taking some action.
Absolutely. Nothing happens. You can get all the intuitive insight in the world, but if you're not using it, then it's useless. Yeah. But here's what clogs people up. They think of the end goal, the lake house on the lake, and they focus, why can't I get there? Why can't I get there? My intuition isn't getting me there. It's because you're looking way too far in the future. It is not a linear path. It's about taking one little step and then coming back to that calm center and then taking the next step, going out into the storm, doing the action, and then coming back to the calm center. It's almost like a reset. Okay, where are we now? Now make a next choice. Where are we now? It's a slower process, but it gets you exactly where you want to go. Or sometimes even places that you never thought were dreamed were possible, like what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. Wow. Well, our time is up, Teresa. How'd that happen? Wow. This has just been fascinating. So if people are going to be working with you, what's the next step? What is the class that they should take to be like an introductory class with you?
Yeah, if you want to take my first class, it's Beginning Intuition. It's an 8-week class. We meet virtually for 90 minutes. And I give some instruction that you can watch during the week. It's usually about 10 minutes, something to read or something to watch. And the class, the 90 minutes, is all experiential. So you will know for yourself right off the bat whether it is something that is working for you or not. And in fact, I do offer, if you sign up, and it's an 8-week class, if after the second week, if you decide, you know what, this just isn't right for me, then you get refunded your money. But no one has ever taken me up on that, because within 2 classes, people are blown away and can feel already what is going on and the importance of the work. So the best thing to do is to send me a direct message, a DM on Instagram, and that's my handle on the screen, _modern-day oracle. And just, send me a message and say, either ask good questions or Bonita, and I can go ahead and send you some information about the next class that I've got coming up.
Awesome. Okay. The Modern Day Oracle. So thank you so much for being here with us. This has been so valuable. I can't tell you how many, I've been in a lot of classes around behavioral finance, and this is really kind of the guts of it. This is the key that people need to really go out there and make good decisions.
Absolutely. And it, like I said, lots of examples that were beyond money, because once you learn, a solid method of being able to access your intuitive gifts, it helps across all areas of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy life.
Yes.
Happy intuition. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Teresa. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the Ask Good Questions podcast.
Today's episode is over, but we did ask good questions again, didn't we? Don't miss out as we broadcast live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. Join Bonita Bell Anderson next week for more conversations with experts on finances, retirement, behavioral finance issues, health and wellness, and more. Until then, remember to ask good questions.